And we come now to 1 hour 30 Universal Time. In the news at this hour, the government of Sudan and the largest rebel group in the Darfur area have reached a peace agreement. The peace plan was signed on Friday in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. 2 other rebel groups have rejected the plan. The agreement calls for government-supported militants to disarm. Rebel fighters also will be taken into the Sudanese army. United Nations Secretary-General Kofi Annan said he hopes all rebel groups would agree to the plan in the next few days. The United States military in Iraq says a bomb attack has killed 3 American soldiers. The military said the soldiers were killed when their vehicle struck a bomb in Babil province, south of Baghdad. Separately, officials said gunmen killed a police officer in Diwaniyah, also south of Baghdad, and at least 6 oil company employees were kidnapped from their vehicle as they traveled near Kirkuk. An Israeli airstrike in Gaza has killed at least 4 people. The Israeli government and Palestinians say the target was a camp used by the Popular Resistance Committees. The group has claimed responsibility for firing rockets at Israel. An Israeli spokesman said the attack took place while militants were training at the camp. Earlier on Friday, Israeli troops shot and killed a Palestinian demonstrator in the West Bank town of Nablus. The violence comes 1 day after Israel's new government took office. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has urged Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert to restart negotiations with the Palestinians. The European Union has proposed a plan to get aid to the Palestinian people without giving money to the Hamas-led government. The European Commission says EU countries first must approve the proposal. Then, the plan will be presented to a meeting of Middle East peace negotiators. These include the United States, the European Union, Russia, and the United Nations. The United States and the EU cut off aid to the Palestinian Authority when Hamas took control of the government in March. The President of Argentina has led a protest against 2 factories Uruguay is building across the border. President Néstor Kirchner has called on Uruguay to stop building the factories until an environmental study can be made. Argentina recently took legal action against Uruguay in the International Court of Justice. Critics of the project say chemicals from the factories could pollute the Uruguay River, which forms the border of the 2 countries. A recent public opinion study says former Peruvian President Alan Garcia has more support than Ollanta Humala. Mr. Garcia will face Mr. Humala in the final part of the presidential election on June 4th. The Datum organization released the study. The study included more than 1,000 people. Mr. Garcia was supported by 56%. Mr. Humala received 44%. You are listening to the news in VOA Special English. A Japanese negotiator is expected to arrive in the Sri Lankan capital, Colombo, to try to restart peace talks between the government and rebels. Yasasuhi Akashi will meet on Saturday with Sri Lankan President Mahinda Rajapaksa and separately with Tamil Tiger leaders. On Friday, the Sri Lankan Navy and Air Force attacked boats belonging to Tamil Tiger rebels off the country's northwestern coast. At least one of the rebels' boats was sunk. Sri Lankan officials said the rebels fired on Navy boats. The United Nations Committee on Torture is studying America's treatment of prisoners in other countries. Committee members met on Friday in Geneva, Switzerland. American human rights official Barry Lowenkron spoke at the public meeting. He defended America's treatment of terror suspects held in other countries. Other officials said there have been examples of wrongdoing, but they said it could not be considered a system of torture. The meetings are to continue on Monday. The European Parliament is investigating reports that the Central Intelligence Agency illegally flew suspects across Europe. Human rights groups say some suspects were taken to secret prisons in Eastern Europe and tortured. In Britain, Prime Minister Tony Blair has begun to reorganize his cabinet after his Labour Party suffered losses in local elections. Mr. Blair replaced Foreign Secretary Jack Straw with Margaret Beckett, the Environment Minister. No reason was given for the dismissal, but reports say Mr. Blair and Mr. Straw disagreed on the government's policy on Iran. Observers from the African Union and other groups say this week's presidential election in Chad was free and fair. The election took place on Tuesday. Chad's Electoral Commission says 70% of those who could vote did so. Media reports say Western diplomats and reporters were surprised by the announcement. Reports on Tuesday said many people observed a boycott called by Chad's opposition parties. A reporter for VOA News said voting centers in the capital, N'Djamena, had little activity. And so, briefly now, here again is the major news of this hour. The Sudanese government and the largest rebel group in the Darfur area have reached a peace agreement. The President of Argentina has led a protest against 2 factories that Uruguay is building across the border. And a recent public opinion study says former Peruvian President Alan Garcia has more support than Ollanta Humala. So ends the news in VOA Special English.